Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make interactable foliage in Unreal Engine 4. What I mean by interactable is that you can, cut trees down, have, destructible meshes on your foliage, and all that fun stuff. So, first thing you want to do is, you want to have your foliage meshes here. I have my, my tree and my wheat. I'm actually going to rename this to my wheat. Alright, so I have my two meshes here. Now what you're going to want to do is, for each mesh that you want to interact with, you want to make a blueprint for that mesh. So I'm going to make a my tree blueprint of type actor. Now I'm going to go into my blueprint, go into the viewport, and I'm just going to drag in my tree. So basically the blueprint and the mesh itself is pretty much going to be the same as far as what's in it goes. And so next you want to go back into your viewport, into your blueprint, and you want to set up your collision. So mine's at block all dynamic, that's what I want, right, because I don't want to be walking through my tree. But I'm also going to turn on simulate physics, right, because I obviously want my tree to fall, right? I don't want it to just sit there. Alright, and you probably want to also override this mass in kg to something more realistic. So, if this was wheat, I might put the mass to be like 0.1. Since this is a tree, I'm going to set it to 2,000 kilograms. Alright, so that'll just make the physics a little bit more realistic for our tree. And that should be everything. Alright, yep, so really all you need to do for this is just drag in your plant into your plant's blueprint, and then set up make sure your collision is what you want, and also your simulate physics if you want it to do that. I'm also going to do this for the my wheat. And remember, this does need to be, the parent class does need to be wheat, or sorry, actor. So I'm just going to make this my wheat underscore BP, or blueprint. And again, I'm just going to drag in my mesh into the blueprint. Right, so there I have my wheat, and I'm just going to look at the collision. And for collision, I do not want this to have collision. Well, I want it to collide with the ground, but not with the player, so I'm actually going to set up custom collision. And let's see here. I want it to ignore pawns. Alright, so that should be good for now. Alright, and next, you probably want to save these. Let me just save this blueprint. Alright, so now that I've got those all saved, what I'm going to do is you want to go into the Foliage tab, and you want to drag in your meshes. Remember, it has to be the mesh itself, not the blueprint that you made. Alright, so I'm going to drag in the my wheat and the my tree. And next you want to click on your meshes, and you want to go down to collision and make sure that's correct. So for a tree, you probably want to just set your collision to block all dynamic, because you don't want anything walking through your tree, right? And so yeah, that should be good for our tree. And I'm actually going to set the density down to 5 for the tree. And for the wheat, for something like wheat, you're probably going to need custom collision. Because for what we're going to be doing, our meshes need to block line traces, but that's really all they need to block. So for wheat, you want to be able to walk through it and all of that, but you also want it to block line traces. So just go down here and pick a custom collision, and check all for the ignore tab, but then under trace responses, make sure those are set to block. So everything should be ignoring besides the trace responses for visibility and camera. Alright, so these settings are for something like grass and wheat you want to be able to walk through, and the block all dynamics just for something like a tree. Right. So let me just edit the density. Well, yeah. Let me just find a good density for my wheat. Yeah, that's quite a bit of wheat. Let me turn that down. I don't know, 10. I'll do 5. That should work out for me. Yep. Alright, so now that I've got my settings how I want them, oh, and this density, you don't need to set that to 5 or anything. That's just how thick I want it to be. Alright, so your next step is to paint some stuff in the world. I'll play around with it. First I'm just going to paint some trees here. Turn up my brush size. That's quite a few, I'll do 1. Alright, so now I do have a few trees in my world. And now I just want some wheat. Right, so now you can see I have trees and wheat. That should be perfect right now. So, go ahead and play. You can see that yeah, this is just, pretty great. We have everything how we want it. But you can see here I did, well, I did go, you remember that we did create blueprints for each of these meshes, so I have my tree blueprint. But you'll notice if I try to interact with this, even though simulate physics is on in my tree blueprint, nothing happens. That's because this tree right here and all the other trees aren't actually from the tree blueprint. They're actually instances of the static mesh, of the my tree static mesh. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be converting these foliage instances into actors. And as you may know, foliage instances are completely completely static, which means we can't really interact with them. We can't we can't edit their properties really. And so, we're basically going to convert these into completely dynamic actors. Trees can fall down. We can have destructible wheat if we want. We can have collectible wheat, harvest it, and all that good stuff. So, what you want to do is, first you want to find out which blueprint you want to do this in. So, what we're basically going to be doing is we're going to trace a few units in front of the player, then we're going to cut the tree down, right? So, if we're standing in front of this tree, and we press the button, it's going to fall down, right? We're going to cut the tree down. And for wheat, we are going to have that be destructible wheat. So, you'll see what I mean in a little bit, but you can make this code wherever you want. I'm going to be doing it in my character blueprint, simply because the character blueprint is, we are going to be doing the line traces and other things from the character. So once you're into your blueprint, there's a few things you want to do to begin. And what we're going to do is we need to create 3 variables, right? So we have a so we have a component variable. Feel free to rename these to whatever you want, but I picked the names that I thought were best. And the component variable is of type instance static mesh component. And compile that. And we don't want any default value for this. But next variable we need to make is a it's going to be instance transform. And that's going to be of type transform. And compile that. No default value for that either. And the last variable we need to make is instance index. That's going to be an int. And compile that. Alright, so we do have our variable set up here. Now we need to do the line trace to our static mesh, right? So first I'm going to add an input. I'm not going to actually add a real input, but I'm just going to add a key that we can press. So in my case, I'll just do input F. That should work pretty good. Alright, and so when we press F, we want to do a line trace by channel. And the start, we want to line trace from the camera to, in front of the camera. So we just want to rotate, we just want to line trace in front of the player, essentially. So what I'm going to do is go into here, into my components, and I'm going to drag out the first person camera, or you can do whatever camera you have. If you don't have a camera, you can trace from the mesh or, whatever you want. but I'll be tracing from the first person camera, and I'm just going to do get world location, and I'm going to drag that to the start. So it's tracing from the camera's world location, and then we need to get a few units in front of the player. So what we're going to do is do get control rotation, and we're going to essentially what we're doing is we're inputting the rotation, and using the rotation we're going to be finding out, you know, where the location is a couple hundred units in front of the player. Alright, so we're going to get the forward vector of the control rotation, and we're going to multiply the result by a float. I'm just going to multiply that by, I don't know, I'll do 1,000. No, I'll do 500. 1,000 quite far. Nah, yeah, I'll do 500. Right? And then, essentially what this is 500 units in front of the camera. But it won't really be in front of the camera unless we add these two together. Alright, so now that we've added those two together, we want to hook that up to end. And there we go. Now, I'm going to set the draw debug type to for duration. I'm just going to go ahead and test this out and make sure it works. Alright, so you can see it does trace in front of the camera a certain distance. Alright. The line trace is working as it should, but there's actually a problem I need to go over. So, some of you, if you've set up your own custom characters, you may not be using control rotation. So instead of using get control rotation, you may need to try something like the camera's rotation. So maybe the get world rotation of your camera, and then hook that up. You know, it really all depends. You may be using your, you know, you may want to drag in your mesh and use your mesh's rotation. You know, it really all depends on how you have it set up, but for most people it's probably going to be get control rotation. Alright? So it's just going to be whatever you're using to rotate your character when you walk around. Alright, so now that we've got that set up, that's all we need to do for this area, for the line trace. Now, what we need to do is, off of line trace, we want to break the hit result of the out hit. Alright? And what we're going to do is we need to use a few of these. What we need to use is the hit component and hit item. So we're not going to use those quite yet, but off of the line trace you want to cast to instance static mesh component. Right, and essentially what this is going to do is, well, first link up object to the hit component. Alright, so essentially what this is going to do is when we line trace, if we did hit the correct type of mesh that Foliage uses, then it'll output through this execution node. If it was the wrong thing that we line trace to, it will just fail the cast. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to print string when it fails cast. I'm just going to type cast failed. Alright, so now that we've got that set up, I'm actually going to move this up here for organizational purposes. But now what we need to do is grab our instance index variable. You want to set it right after the cast, and we are going to set it to the hit item from the break hit result. Alright, now what we need to do is also set another variable. You want to set the component variable right after the instance index set, and we want to set it to the return node of the cast. Alright, so it's essentially going to set this component to be a instance static mesh component, if that makes sense. Alright, now we also need to set our last variable, our instance transform. So let's just set that right after we set the component, and what we're going to set that to is we actually need to drag off of this component and do get instance transform. And for the instance index input, we want to link that up to hit item. For world space, you want to leave that unchecked, set to false. And then the we're going to set this out. We're going to set the instance transform to be this out instance transform return node, return pin. Alright, and I'm just going to drag this out here, make it a little bit more organized. Alright, so now we've got our 3 variables set up. Now we can do some checks and perform certain actions based on which mesh we hit, right? So we obviously, depending on which mesh we hit, right? If we line trace to a tree, we probably want something different to happen than if we line trace to a wheat, right? So we want to have different properties based on which item we trace to. So that's what we're going to set up right now. So straight off of this set instance transform, you want to grab a branch. What this branch is going to do is going to check for which mesh we hit, right? So there's a few different, I have 2 meshes in this case. I have my tree and my wheat meshes, right? So if it's my tree, I want the tree to fall down. If it's my wheat, I want something else to happen, right? So we need to do a, well, straight off of this component, just drag your component variable into your scene, do a get, and off of component you want to do get static mesh. And using the static mesh, we want to check if the static mesh is my tree. So you want to do a equal object, and for the asset you want to select the my tree, or whatever your mesh is, right? So we have 3 options here. We have my tree, which is a redirector. I'm actually not sure why that's there, but you want to pick a static mesh. Make sure you do not pick the blueprint that you made. So you want to check the static mesh. Alright, so what this is doing is it's saying, if the mesh that we line trace to equals my tree, then do this. If not, do this, right? So we're actually going to make another branch when it's false. So if it's not my tree, then we want to check if it's my wheat. Alright? So grab another equal object and put in your second mesh. So we're going to do my wheat. Remember, you need to pick the static mesh. Alright, so what we have here is if the mesh we trace to is my tree, it'll do this. If it's not my tree, then we check if it's my wheat. If it is my wheat, then we do this, right? And if it's false, we're not going to do anything. But, if you have like 10 meshes, then you'll need to add like 10 branches and check for each mesh, right? And you can also do some things with enumerations, but I'm not going to get into that for this video. Alright, so I'm actually going to drag this down here, make it a little bit more organized. Oops. My bad. Giving me trouble. Alright, so I have got this a little bit more organized now. So now we just need to set up what happens if we trace to my tree. Alright, so straight off of your true on the branch, you want to spawn your mesh blueprint. So in my case it's my tree underscore BP. So actually you need to type in spawn actor from class, and the class is going to be whatever mesh you're checking for, right? So if it's my tree that I'm checking for, like if I do trace to my tree, if that's true, then the class I want to spawn is going to be my tree underscore BP. And it will need to be the blueprint that you pick. And for the spawn transform, that's just going to be our instance transform variable. Just go ahead and hook that up. And the spawn, even if colliding, you might want to do that. It really all depends. I'm going to check that for now, just in case we have any bugs. But now that we've spawned that, we just have 2 more things to add for the my tree. And that is going to be right after the spawn actor, my tree, we want to do remove instance. Well, actually, to do this, you need to drag in your component and do a get. And from your component, you want to type remove instance. And the instance index that we want to remove is going to be our instance index variable. Alright, and hook that up to the spawn actor. So right after you spawn the actor, you want to remove the instance, right? Because essentially what we're doing here, let me just kind of explain this. So we're essentially tracing to whatever foliage mesh we have, right? And we're pretty much replacing that instance with an actor, right? So we add an actor and remove the instance, right? The reason we're removing the instance is because we have our tree instance, right, and we're replacing with the tree actor, so we no longer need the instance, right, because the instance is static and we don't want that. Alright, let me just organize these here. Alright, so I'm also going to print string and print that this is a tree. Obviously, if this is like, I don't know, a bush that you're tracing to, then you want to, have this be something else. Alright, now we have that all set up for our tree. Now we just need to set that up for if we trace to my wheat. Now if we trace to my wheat, we're pretty much going to do the same thing. We're going to spawn actor from class, and the class is going to be mywheat_bp. I'm just going to pick that, and again the spawn transform is going to be the instance index, instance transform. Alright, and spawn even if colliding, I'm going to set that to true, and again we just need to remove instance with the same variables, same target, and same instance index as before. And I'm also going to print string, and I'm just going to print wheat, because it is a wheat we're interacting with. Alright, so let me just give you a quick overview of this. We're tracing to our foliage. If the foliage is a tree, we're going to swap it out with an actor and remove its instance and then trace that it's a tree. If our foliage is wheat, then we're just going to, again, spawn the wheat and remove the wheat instance and then trace wheat. Right? So let's go ahead and give this a try. We may have missed something. Hopefully we didn't. And hopefully this doesn't crash. But, yep, as you can see, we just converted this to an actor. Now we can push our tree down. And remember, the reason it's falling is because in our tree blueprint we did set up simulate physics, right? And so pay real close attention here. I'm going to press F, and what's going to happen is this tree is going to raise up. Right, so you can see that tree did just glitch up a little bit, because what happened was our foliage instance was in the ground a little bit, and when we turned it into an actor, it was forced out of the ground because of its collision. Right, so obviously I don't have the perfect collision, which is why these trees stand up a little bit when I convert them to actors, but that shouldn't be a problem. Alright, so as you can see, you can push these down, and what you can do is, if you have your tree here, you'll notice when I press the button, well, actually the cast failed. Yep, that's already an actor. But if we go over here, let me show you here. So if I press the button, right, it turns into an actor, but it doesn't fall down, right? That's because all I'm doing is converting it to an actor, right? If you want it to, let's say this is a chainsaw game, right, where you go around and cut down trees. You probably want to have it so when you press the button, it moves the chainsaw towards the tree, and it makes the tree fall down. And you can make the tree fall down easily by, when you spawn the tree actor, you can just add a force right up there. It'll pretty much add a shockwave and it'll push the trees over. Alright, now we just need to test this for wheat. Hopefully this doesn't crash. Cast failed. Alright, so let's see here. Now let's see if it works with another wheat. The reason our cast is failing actually is because I didn't set up the collision properly for a wheat. So if this is happening to you, you'll need to change some collision settings for your wheat or grass or whatever it may be. Let's see, this is set to block. Let's see here. For now I'm going to test it to block. I'm going to have it block all and see what that does. Actually, I know what it is. It's because while we did have our collision set in here, we actually don't have a collision volume in our wheat itself, right? So you actually need to keep the collision settings how they were, but if you have absolutely no, if nothing's working with these settings, then you actually want to go into your static mesh itself, and you can see there is no collision in here. So I'm just going to grab a collision. I'm going to do add box simplified collision. and I'm actually gonna make my collision a little bit smaller if I can. I haven't played around with collision too much, so I'm not sure if I can. I'm actually going to leave this collision how it is. You can adjust your collision size to be more accurate if you want. But now that we have our collision actually set up, let's go ahead and test this. I'm actually going to pause the video and see what's going on. Alright guys, so I figured out what it was. It was just that in your collision for your grass or wheat, or in your collision for things you want to be able to walk through, you need to go into your Foliage tab and click on that mesh. And you want to set collision enabled up here by the collision presets. You want to set to collision enabled. Before I had it set to no collision, but if you set it to collision enabled, it will not work, right? So now if we go in here, we can trace. It says that it's wheat, right? And we can still walk through it. And you may notice that when you turn it into an actor, the colors do change a little bit. That's just because the lighting is a little bit different. I mean, you can tweak the lighting settings how you want, but you'll notice once we've turned it into an actor, there's really no difference. That's because we haven't set it up to do anything yet, right? So what we need to do is I'm gonna want my wheat to crumble into little pieces when we interact with it, right? Because we're harvesting the wheat. So what I'm gonna do is you want to go into your grass or wheat blueprint, and you actually want to make a destructible mesh for this. So go to your static mesh, right click, and click create destructible mesh, right? So now we have this my wheat underscore DM, and you can see here we can fracture our wheat how we want, and this is actually quite a few, well, not as many pieces as I'd like. So in your my wheat DM or whatever DM, you can set your cell site count to be something higher. I believe that's what the pieces are. I'm not completely sure. But yeah, I'm just going to leave my cell site count at 25 for now, just for performance reasons. But inside of your destructible mesh area, blueprint thing, you want to look for enable impact damage. Well, that's if you want it to have impact damage. For example, if this was a destructible mesh for a tree, you'd want this because, you know, when your tree falls and hits the ground, you might want it to break into pieces. You know, it's up to you. But for this, well, no, I'll take off impact damage and I'll just apply some damage. So now that we have our destructible mesh created, we actually need to go back into our blueprint and get rid of this wheat, because we're not going to use the wheat static mesh, we're going to use the wheat destructible mesh, right? So you want to drag your destructible mesh into your blueprint. And remember, all of this that I'm doing right now is for only if you want destructible meshes, alright? So let's see here. I am going to want it to simulate physics, and let's see, collision destructible. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is on event begin play, I'm going to apply damage to the my wheat. Yep, alright, and I'm just going to apply, I don't know, 10 damage. And we'll just see if this works. Basically what I have set up is when we turn it into an actor. Actually, this has a problem. I'm going to pause this real quick. Alright, so I figured out what it was. It was just that we didn't have the hit location and the impulse direction inputs hooked up. So you probably want to hook those up. And this is what I have. I just have my apply damage. I have the impulse strength set to 200. I'm actually going to set that to, I don't know, 500. The damage amount can just be 10. That should be good. And I'll set that to 100 just for fun. And one thing I forgot to mention is that if this is something like grass or, you know, wheat that you're doing, you'll probably want to actually go back into your mesh area, and you'll probably want to set the collision. Oh, I'm gonna do custom collision. So I don't want it to collide with itself. So the things I do want it to collide with are, well, let's see, this is a destructible. I don't want it to collide with other destructibles. I do want it to collide with these and those. Let's go ahead and test this out. So now I have my custom collision set up, so it shouldn't, the wheat shouldn't get in the way of the other pieces of wheat. So you can see my wheat did just kind of break apart. Now obviously this probably isn't the result you want. There's still wind and the collision's all funky. It isn't breaking into little, probably isn't breaking how you want. Now obviously this is some things you might want to play around with in your destructible mesh blueprint or whatever. You can also change your random seed so that it has a different result. Okay. Random seeds is essentially so you have your random fracture, right? It fractures into random pieces. This isn't actually random. Random numbers in computer programming, they essentially have a seed, and a lot of the time randoms use a seed as time. So essentially what a seed does is it lets you get the same random number over and over again, right? So if we leave our seed at 0, it's just going to keep getting the same random fracture every time. And so we can change our seed if we want, just for a different looking fracture, right? May change it up a little bit. That doesn't matter too much, so I'm just going to leave that there. And you can play around with some settings for these if you want. I'm actually going to leave those alone for now. And actually what I want to do is actually, I was just kind of showing you how to use destructible meshes, but I don't want to use those. What I want to do is I just want to pick up my wheat, right? I just want to harvest my wheat. So what I'm going to do for my wheat is I am going to remove the instance, but I'm not going to spawn a new one because I want to harvest it, right? I don't want to replace it with an actor. So now you'll see when I go to my wheat, I pretty much harvest it there. And you can add like a little animation or something of I don't know, wheat going to a basket or whatever you want. But that's pretty much what we're doing here. And I guess one thing I should talk about is the performance of this. So if you take a look, we're only converting the instance into an actor. The only thing we're converting into an actor is the specific instance that we trace to. And the reason we're doing this is that actors are not very they're not very optimized compared to instances, just because actors are dynamic. So as you can see here, we only want to do this to each tree that we're cutting down. If we converted all these trees into actors, we have 50 trees here, that would drop our FPS down to around 40 or 30 or 40, somewhere around there, but it definitely would lower our performance. So if you notice, if I were to continue to cut down all these trees, and especially if I had a bigger forest of trees, then my FPS will continue to drop. You can see my FPS is around 45 right now, but my FPS is just going to keep getting gradually lower and lower as I convert these into actors. So one thing you may want to do is, if you have a player cut down a tree or whatever, then what you can do is maybe destroy the tree, maybe let them harvest the wood to get rid of the actor. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that you don't want to have a ton of tree actors, right? Especially something big like trees, just because they do have a lot of polygons. So basically, you want to have as little actors as you possibly can, right? So if I were to keep cutting these down, my FPS would just keep getting lower, and that wouldn't be very good. Let's see, what else should I talk about? Alright, so I'm really not sure what else I should show you guys, but you probably should know this, but if you don't, once we've converted our actors, or our trees into actors, we can interact with them as if they were any other object, right? So let's say we have, let's say we want to, well, essentially, once we convert it into an actor, we can do anything with it pretty much. We can, move it around as we please. We can have the player pick it up. We can, launch it in a cannon. Whatever you want to do, you can, now that you're objects are actors. And obviously in this case I am just tracing to my tree to turn it into an actor, but you can do whatever you want. Maybe I don't know, maybe maybe you have a tank game and you want to fire a rocket, and let's say you fire a rocket at a tree, you want to blow up that tree, turn it into a destructible mesh. It's obviously something you can do. The only thing that needs to be consistent is that you do need to have this, you do need to have a trace, because you do need to get this data, right? You need to find out which component, which item it is, and then you just need to convert it into an actor and then remove the instance, right? And something I'm actually going to do is, right after this video, I'm actually going to make another video, another tutorial on how to spawn foliage instances at runtime. I'm going to do a little bit of research and see if anyone's made a tutorial for that. And if they haven't, then I'm just going to make a tutorial on that. And what that'll allow you to do is, let's say you have the player playing the game, right? And they can walk around holding a tree in their hand, and they can place a tree, right? And it will convert it into a foliage instance. So it will have all the optimizations of foliage. At least it should. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, if something's not working, make sure to go post a reply down in the comment section. I'll be sure to reply as quickly as possible and look into any problems you have. If you want me to make another tutorial, just ask. That is something that I do enjoy doing. So, if you have any questions or comments, just make sure to post those down below. And if you like this video, make sure to click the like button. If you want to see more videos, make sure to subscribe. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you next time.